Welcome to the Lifetarian. 360 degrees of life. In this space, Monique shares her personal journey. You will be inspired, encouraged, and empowered as you live your everyday life. Here's your host, Monique Monque.
Hey, Lifetarians. On today's episode, I am going to be sharing with you my personal experience raising a son who suffers from mental health disorders. I also plan on sharing with you what I hope will come from me sharing this episode and give you some information that you'll find in the show notes. So, this episode I have named The Red Balloon. Every parent's worst nightmare is receiving a phone call only to have the voice on the other end of the phone tell you that something tragic has happened to one of your children. I received that phone call on September 12, 2018. I heard the voice say that my son was airlifted to a local hospital, that he had been placed on full-blown life support and was in the intensive care unit. It took my husband and I an hour to get to the hospital in heavy Atlanta traffic. It seemed as though it took another hour for the lead physician taking care of our son to give us the details about what had happened and what condition he was in before they allowed us to see him. We were led into the room where he lay, attached to a respirator, a heart monitor, an oxygen monitor, several IVs, and his head had been shaved in the spot where they placed a drainage tube to relieve the pressure that was building around his swelling brain. As I stood at my son's bedside with fear falling down my face and prayer flowing from my heart, as unimaginable as it was, as my child lay before me fighting for his life, images from a short film by Albert Lamouris flashed through my mind. I did not understand why I was seeing these images in this very moment. The film is called The Red Balloon, which captures the adventures of a boy who befriends a seemingly animate balloon and follows it through the streets of Paris. I remember being introduced to this French film with English subtitles in elementary school. I clearly remember experiencing a menagerie of emotions I felt while watching this film. There are places in this film where the balloon seems to follow the little boy, and then there are places in the film where the boy follows the balloon. There are some scenes in the film where the boy and the balloon are separated, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. There are times when the balloon seems to be vying for the attention of others, and the little boy finds himself competing for the balloon's attention. In order to paint a clearer picture for you, I'm going to repeat my last three sentences, and I'm going to replace the word balloon with the words mental health diagnosis. There are places in the film where the mental health diagnosis seems to follow the little boy, and then there are places in the film where the boy follows the mental health diagnosis. There are some scenes in the film where the boy and the mental health diagnosis are separated, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. There are times when the mental health diagnosis seems to be vying for the attention of others, and the little boy finds himself competing for the mental health diagnosis attention. My youngest son, who was born prematurely and suffered a traumatic brain injury at birth, has been diagnosed with autism, bipolar disorder, and some form of schizophrenia disorder. He is also a type 1 diabetic. He takes a combination of mood-stabilizing drugs as well as 2 types of insulin that he requires to maintain life. Let me try to explain these diagnoses in greater detail as I understand them. Autism means a developmental disorder of variable severity that is characterized by difficulty in social interaction and communication, and by restricted or repetitive patterns of thought and behavior. Bipolar disorder is of psychiatric illness characterized by both manic and depressive episodes or manic ones only. Schizophrenic disorders is defined as a major psychotic disorder characterized by abnormalities in the perception of expression of reality. It affects the cognitive and psychomotive functions. Common clinical signs and symptoms include delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking, and retreat from reality. Attach all of the above to a brain that has already suffered a traumatic injury at birth, is still developing, and is now going through hormonal and chemical imbalances due to puberty. This definitely makes for a really rough life for any teenager, but even more so for an African American teenager. Symbolically speaking, all of these things were attached to my son's little red balloon. The mental health crisis as it pertains to youth in the population of the United States is in code red status. Resources and supports for the youth in our country that suffer from a multitude of mental health disorders are few and far between. Services that are already seemingly non-existent continue to be on the decline. Education and training for our educators, law enforcement officials, and families need to be increased in order to help these young people. They require psychiatric attention and sometimes medical treatment to help with the many symptoms they suffer through on a daily basis. Lack of services, stabilization units, and treatment centers are the main reason why jails and prisons are being filled with these young people and adults in massive numbers who suffer with mental health illnesses. Several of them die in these jails and prisons at the hands of people who are ill-equipped to handle their many needs. My son also almost lost his life in a local jail. He was thrown in jail at 17 years of age instead of receiving medical and psychiatric treatment. What must we do to evoke change? To help our children, to stand up for our children, to fight for our children. We certainly have to rally for legislation to be raised in order to protect our children and youth who are diagnosed with mental health disorders. There is an active petition that I started on the change.org platform to begin the process of building legislation to change laws that will prevent our youth who have IEPs and 504 plans from being thrown in jail due to manifestations of their behaviors that are attributed to documented mental health illnesses. I would also like to see this effort bring to life Red Balloon Day, a day in which we can come together for a massive red balloon release to bring awareness to the mental health crisis as it relates to our youth and to raise money to fund the building of educational programs and materials that will help educators, law enforcement officials, and families better be able to serve those who need our help, our children. I will include in the show notes for this episode a link to the change.org petition. You will be able to read the story about what occurred with my son in its entirety. We certainly appreciate your support in signing and sharing this petition. You will also find links to a couple of articles that I believe will be useful in bringing greater awareness to the epidemic of the mental health crisis as it relates to youth in our country and the overcrowding of our prison system. And if you're curious, you can watch all 34 minutes of The Red Balloon on YouTube. Until next time, Lifeitarians, I offer you life, love, and delight.
For more inspiration, encouragement, and empowerment, make sure you subscribe for more episodes.